If you like good barbecue, then chances are you probably like beef brisket. Well, if you've ever wondered what does it take to smoke my own beef brisket, you've come to the right place. So stick around, we'll show you how we do it here as just a common man, answer some very common questions. So when you're doing a brisket, probably the most important thing for me is to get your timeline laid out. Brisket takes as long as anything you're going to put on a smoker. So, I'm not a professional. I don't do this for competition. We just do it because we like to eat it. So for me, I'm not worried about all of those other things as much as I am, when do I need this thing ready by? So, for instance, this one here, we're going to eat this for supper on Thursday evening. So I already know that I want to have it on the smoker for my timeline probably about 10 o'clock on Wednesday evening. This is Tuesday evening and we're getting started with everything. We're going to get this thing trimmed up, get it seasoned up, and then put it in the refrigerator. And so you kind of need to back your timeline up so that you're starting, the right time. The other thing you need to think about too is getting it thawed out. So this brisket that we have today, I haven't had it in the freezer at all. I bought this one at Costco the other day. It's been sitting in the refrigerator. If you've got one that's frozen, you need to take that into consideration too. Make sure that you put it in the refrigerator several days ahead of time so that it has time to thaw out, all that kind of stuff. So whenever you're trimming it up, you can see we've got our knives out here. And this on this top side, and this is a full packer brisket, so you've got your flat and your point. And you can see there's this big hunk of fat right in here. And this is actually going to go pretty deep down into the brisket. And so don't be afraid to get your knife down into that thing, because you really want to get most of that fat out of there. Now, again, I've said it before, I'm going to continue to say it. If you're looking for competition style brisket, you're looking at the wrong place, because that's not what I do. I learned how to do this, and I'm passing along any kind of information I can to you. You can see that great big hunk of fat, and there's still some in here. And so just come back in again and keep slicing it away until you get down to the level of fat that you want it. You do want to leave some fat on this thing. That's up for debate. Some people are going to tell you different amounts of fat. It's all going to be personal preference. You'll hear me say that all the time. It's all personal preference on this thing. I'm not going to bore you with sitting here watching all of this. I do want to flip the brisket over and let you take a look at the back side of it. And you can see all this big fat cap on here. And today I'm actually going to be taking a look at this quick trim, is what it's called. My sister actually got it. I got the card here. I'll hold it up for you. Island Outdoors Company is where she bought this from. And so I've never used it before, so we're going to see how this thing works out. It's super sharp. When she took it out of the box, there is a guard on it, but the edges were still exposed, and it's extremely sharp. So if you get one, be careful. We'll take a look at how good this thing works. And you can see it's just peeling away at that fat. And on this front side, you can see we're already getting down to the meat. Again, personal preference. How close to that meat do you want it? I like to trim nearly all of that fat off. I'm going to get down to where you're actually seeing meat in places. Not the whole way around, because some of this fat is going to render down, and you want that fat left on there, because that's where you're going to get a lot of your taste. So don't think you got to trim everything off. And see right here, it's already bringing it down right at that level where the meat is. And so I don't want to be taking too much off of there. So this thing works decent. Make sure that you be careful when you're peeling that stuff off of there. And then just peeling it right down off and away. So again, You're going to peel the fat off, and I'll show you how much I take off. I'm not going to sit here and make you watch the whole thing. Again, you've got your knives with you too. Just take your knives and start working it away until you get it down to the level you want. So we'll get this thing trimmed up. We're going to take a break. We'll trim it up, show you what we end up with, and then I'll show you what I do to season my briskets up, and you can take it from there and do however you like. Okay, so we've got our brisket seasoned up, or trimmed up, and if you take a look here, you can see that I've taken pretty much all that fat off. Over in here was where it kind of went down in, and then we flip it over. Again, I take almost everything. You may want to leave more fat on your brisket. It's up to you. I'll say it again, personal preference. So, at this point, we're going to get ours seasoned up. Now, if you can see in the video, the grain of the meat is running this way. So the one thing I like to do, you're going to think about this whenever you slice your brisket up, you know, here in a couple of days whenever it's done. You always want to cut against that grain. So the one thing that I do is now, at the very beginning, I just take my knife and I go against the grain and I just bring some slices down into this thing. Just to let some of this seasoning get in here. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. The other thing that helps you, it helps get some of that seasoning down in the meat, but it also gives you kind of a guide, because once this thing gets a good bark on the outside, it's hard to see where the grain's going until you actually get into it. Maybe these cuts will help you remember that's the way you want to slice it. So as far as seasoning it up, there's no skill to this. I have an old shaker here that's got a mixture of kosher salt and pepper. I use kosher salt and pepper, and then good old Montreal steak seasoning. That's it. I don't get into any other kind of rubs, or I don't coat it with anything. Some people, put olive oil on it to get everything to stick. For me, I've found that this works just as well as anything. You're going to want to give it a good liberal coating on here. So don't be shy. This is where you're going to get that bark. Don't think that you're giving it too much salt. Hopefully you can see. Get it down into these cuts that we've made, the places where you've trimmed it away. You want to get it all on there. You're going to want to get it on the edges. So don't be shy as you go along here. And then once you get that finished, again, I just come back with Montreal steak seasoning, and I'm going to do the same thing right over top of it. So our video cut out there. Hopefully we're good now. I've gone ahead and got this thing all seasoned up. Again, just kosher salt, pepper, and then Montreal steak seasoning is what I use. You can use whatever you like. You can see, don't be afraid to go heavy on this thing. This is where your bark is going to come from. You want that heavy layer of seasoning on there when this thing's all finished up. That's where you're going to get that good bark and that taste and everything from. So don't be shy. Go ahead and go on that thing pretty heavy. At this point, I just take one of these aluminum pans and I set it down in here, and we'll go ahead and get this thing covered up with some saran wrap, probably a layer of aluminum foil over the top of it, and then we're going to stick it back in the refrigerator, and we're going to leave it there all night tonight, all day tomorrow, and probably tomorrow evening about this time, we're going to be getting that thing ready to put onto the smoker. So again, take off the amount of fat that you think is appropriate, season that thing up according to your liking, let it sit overnight, and then we'll show you what we do to get this thing going tomorrow evening. Okay, it is about 10 o'clock on Wednesday evening, and as you can see, we are inside of our garage. We've got heavy storms rolling through the area. Tonight, there's flash flood warnings in effect. It's been raining all evening, so it's actually slacked off now, but we figured better safe than sorry. So we moved everything just inside the garage door to keep dry tonight. I've done this before. I've smoked here at the garage, you know, when it's raining. I've smoked in here when it's snowing. So sometimes you just got to be, you know, ready to change things up at a moment's notice. So anyway, it's like I said, it's about 10 o'clock, and as I mentioned before, timing is everything. So for this smoke that we're going to do, brisket, again, I think I said this is probably one of the longest things you're going to have. We're going to go low and slow on that heat, just trying to keep a good constant temperature of about 225 degrees. Keeping good smoke on it. I'm using, I got charcoal is what I use for my heat source, and then I have chunks of apple wood that I've cut. And so, you know, here where we live, I like to use the apple wood. We've got a lot of apple orchards around. And so I just think it gives it its own unique flavor with using the apple wood smoke. And then I'll spray it down throughout the night with some apple juice just to keep it a little bit moist. But anyway, we're starting at about 10 o'clock tonight, and we're going to have this thing for supper tomorrow. So make sure that you give yourself plenty of time. You can't rush it. If you fall behind, if it stalls and you just can't get past that stall and you try to hurry things up, it's not going to work. You're better off to start earlier than you think you need to. You can keep these briskets hot for a long time. We'll show you tomorrow what we do. Wrap it all up in some foil and put it in a cooler and wrap it in some towels. And this thing, there was one day I pulled a brisket off the smoker at about 8 o'clock in the morning, wrapped it up, put it in a cooler, put it in the back of the car. We drove 4 hours to Smith Mountain Lake. Left it in the cooler the rest of the day while we played around in the lake, pulled it out for supper that night, and it was still hot. So don't worry about keeping it hot. You're better off to start earlier than to try to rush things at the end. So we're going to get this thing put on. The smoker is just about up to temperature. I'm going to keep an eye on it all night long. But at this point, as I said yesterday, we wrapped it up in this pan with some aluminum foil and saran wrap. And so now at this point, we're ready to get this thing on the smoker. So you're going to hear a lot of arguments, fat side up, fat side down. I've heard arguments both ways. I don't know if there's one way that's better than another. I'm going to put mine fat side up on this smoke and let it render down through, you know, over the next several hours. So again, there's no rhyme or reason to this. And I usually put the point side toward the firebox on this thing. That's it. I'm going to keep this pan. I'm going to wash it up because I actually use that later on after we're ready to take this thing and get it wrapped up. I'll tell you some different ways that I've heard that people do things. I'll show you what I do. As far as a smoker goes, if you're new to smoking and you're watching this and you don't even have a smoker yet, there's tons of different kinds out there. I've just got an offset smoker here. I started with a small one. I've got this one. I've got a propane smoker that I use sometimes as well. Do your homework, figure out what works best for you. The offset smoker, I have found, gives things the most amount of smoke flavor above any of the others, but it requires the most amount of babysitting. You really got to tend this thing. You can't just set it and forget it. You got to keep up with it. And if you're not into that, this is not the smoker for you. If you just like to push a button and let the pellets take over and not worry about it, you're better off to spend some extra money and get something a little higher end. I like watching these things. You know, I've kind of got this one down. I'll be able to keep the fire on it for probably 2, 3, 4 hours maybe. Get some sleep, jump up in the middle of the night and check it a couple times. And, you know, I don't mind doing that kind of thing. If that's not you, don't go with this kind of smoker. So, we've got the smoker on. One other thing I am going to do, and I should have done it before I put it in, is I'm going to get a thermometer in this thing. Now, this is going to be a long time before it's ready to really start checking any kind of temperatures. However, this gauge that I have, it's Easy Barbecue. I think my in-laws got me this for Christmas a few years ago. It connects Bluetooth connection to your phone, and so as long as you stay within range, you can keep an eye on the temperature of everything. Just get it put in, and I like to run it back in through the center. and then just plug it in. And you can get readings off of it right here, or like I said, you can get readings on your phone. This thing's nice. You can set whatever the temperature is that you're looking for. It'll alert you once you've hit that. So it's a handy tool. There's tons of those out there. There's instant reads, all kinds of stuff. Just find the one that works best for you. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna make sure that I keep good heat. Like I said, we're gonna run about 225 as close as we can all night long. I'm gonna make sure that I keep apple wood in there to keep that good smoke going to it. And we'll check it every couple hours. And then every time I do get up and check it, I'm gonna hit it with some apple juice. So that's just something I do. You don't have to do that, but like I said, probably every 3 hours or so, I'm gonna be spraying that thing down with some apple juice, whenever I make sure that the heat is good on it. I'm not gonna show you every time that we do that. We'll pick back up in the morning. Whenever we're ready to wrap this thing up, we'll show you what the bark looks like on it. You don't want to be opening and closing this thing all night long. When I come out and check the heat, other than spritzing it down with some apple juice, that's the only time this thing's going to be opened up. I'm going to leave that door closed on it, probably for about the next 9 hours. So we'll take a look at it in the morning and see what we got. All right, it is 4 o'clock in the morning, so we've been on the smoker now for 6 hours. Just want to take a look at it, let you see how we're doing here, and give you an idea of what you'll be looking for. And you can see you're starting to get a decent bark on the outside of that thing. Again, for me, every time I do this, I just come by and I spray it down with some apple juice just to keep it moist. I know a lot of people will put a pan of water in with it. I did that, I think, one time, and then ever since I've done it without, and I really haven't noticed a difference. So again, we're not gonna leave it open. Just make sure that the fire is good. And if you looked at my temperature gauge there, it doesn't work. That's why I use that Easy Barbecue to keep the monitoring the temperature there. But that's it. Just keep your fire going, your smoke going. Like I said, we've been on about 6 hours now, and we're going to give it another 3 hours here of pure smoke, and then we'll pick back up and I'll show you what we do to get everything kind of finished off. Okay, it's about 7 o'clock in the morning, so we've been on the smoker for 9 hours. I did want to point out just a couple things that I thought of that I didn't mention last night. As I said, it had been raining. We had moved inside the garage. One thing you may have noticed is there's a bucket underneath of my offset firebox there. I do that whenever I have to move inside. I got it about halfway filled with water, just so any of those hot ashes, coals, anything that fall out of that thing, they don't fall on the floor. They fall in that bucket of water, puts them out right away, just to keep things safe. The other thing that I do, of course, I mentioned that I burn the apple wood. I do soak that in a bucket, those chunks, for usually a day ahead of time. You know how it is if you try to light a fire with wet wood, it just doesn't want to take off and sit there and smolders and smokes and everything. Just a way to get you a little bit of extra smoke. I've done it also, where I've forgotten to soak some things, and the only difference is it's going to burn up a little bit faster on you. So, if you can soak it a little bit ahead of time, that's going to help you out too. So, the other thing I want to mention is our temperature on our brisket. We're at about 153 degrees, and we've been there for probably going on 3 hours now. So I haven't mentioned it yet, but if you've looked into smoking briskets at all, there's what they call the stall, and that's where we're at right now. It hit that 150 mark, and the temperature had been climbing gradually all along. It hit that mark, and it is just flatlined for 3 hours now. So there's really nothing you can do. There's, you can read up on it. Some people say it's the fat that's rendering down through the meat, and it's actually cooling the internal temperature. I read an article recently where they said it had to do with some kind of evaporation. I don't know what it is. All I know is that it happens and you can't do anything about it. That's why I said before, you're better off to plan early. If it gets done earlier than you thought it would, you can keep it hot. But now at this point, there's no speeding it up. It's gonna have to wait until it gets through that stall before that temperature starts climbing again to 198 degrees, which is where we're shooting for today. So, with that being said, we do have enough smoke on it that I don't need to keep smoking the meat. At this point, you know, people call it the Texas crutch. They'll wrap it up in aluminum foil and get it back on. Some people use the brown butcher paper and wrap it up in that. I actually have found the best luck just using the same foil pan that I had this thing in the refrigerator in. So I'm gonna pull it out, put it in the pan. I'm gonna dump some beef broth and the rest of my apple juice in with it. And we're just gonna let it sit in those juices and it's gonna create its own juices. My experience for what we do, just to eat at home, again, I've said it before, this is not competition style, this is not selling it, this is just for us eating here at the house. And this works for us. So I got a set of heat resistant gloves here that I'm gonna put on. And we'll get this thing off of the smoker and into the pan. You can see, hopefully, that there's a pretty good bark on the outside of this thing. And I'm going to leave the probe in it. And then we're just going to cover the top of this thing with a sheet of aluminum foil. So usually I use just one can of beef broth. We had this one open from something we had used earlier this week. So I'm just gonna guess at how much I'm putting in. We'll stop there. And like I said, about an equal part or so of the apple juice. So along with those two things, it's going to create its own juices. And you're actually going to save that later on. So keep that in mind. When you finish up later on, you don't want to just dump everything out. So get this on nice and tight. And then you're ready to put it back on the heat. So I'm gonna do something today that I do probably about half the time. I'm not putting it back on the smoker. I'm actually gonna put this thing in the oven. If you're a purist and you're watching, you've probably already rolled your eyes and maybe even turned this off by now. But I'm gonna tell you why I do that. Number one, I'm not using any more smoke. I don't need any more of that smoke on it. I've got enough. All I'm doing now is creating that heat source to get me through this stall and get me back up to the temperature that I need to get to. So I don't necessarily want to burn up all my charcoal just for that. The second reason is I've actually got other things to do. I've said it before, I'll say it again. You know, this is not my job. This is just something that we do, you know, to eat because we enjoy it. The rain's letting up. I'm actually going out and playing a little bit of golf this morning. My brother-in-law are taking our dads, the two of us, and so my dad doesn't get out very often. I'm looking forward to it. We're only going to play 9 holes, so I'm not going to be gone that long. So I'm going to put this thing in the oven. I can keep it a good constant 225 degrees. It's still going to take several hours to get me up to where I want to go. I'm going to be back in time to do that. So I am going to put this thing in the oven and finish it up. I've done that before, you know, when I've finished things in the middle of the night when we need them for lunch or something like that. Again, you can put it right back on your pit and keep the heat going to it. I have had no problem putting mine in the oven and finishing it up like that. So we're gonna get this thing inside. I'm gonna plug it back into the Easy Barbecue gauge so that I can keep an eye on that temperature. And then whenever we hit the 198 degrees, we'll pick it back up and show you what we got. Okay, so it took about 4 hours in the oven, and the temperature shot right up to 198. It actually jumped past and went to 203. And so now we're going to get this thing out of the pan and get it all wrapped up. And we're going to have this for supper this evening. So again, we've got 4 or 5 hours that we're going to keep this thing wrapped up, but it will stay hot that entire time. So again, I use this pan to collect all those juices in. You can see the steam coming off of it now. So we'll pull our temperature probe out. And this it's gonna be really hot, so make sure you got a good pair of gloves. Now, I'm not gonna cut this thing apart yet. I'm just gonna wrap it whole right here as it is. And the juices that are in this tray, we're actually gonna save those. So I'm gonna come around and show you what we do to get that finished up. But now you're just going to wrap it up nice and tight. Just get that foil wrapped up around there good. 3 layers is going to be good enough. And then I've just got some old towels that we're going to put this thing in. And then another one. Same thing, just wrapping it up. And then you can see here I've got an old cooler. This has become our meat cooler. And we're just going to set it right down in there and leave that thing for the rest of the day. I've got a jar here, and you'll see I'll go ahead and pour the juice that we had left over in this jar. And what I'm going to do with this, we're going to get just about all of it in there. I'll stop right there. There's just a little bit left. Put a lid on it. And I'm going to sit this in the freezer for probably a couple of hours. And what's going to happen is all that fat is going to come to the top, and it's going to start to solidify. And I'll be able to just take a spoon and go through and skim it right off the top and get all that fat out of there. And then we'll just bring that juice back to a boil and pour it back over top of the meat once we slice everything up later on. So we'll take a look at that here at supper time. I'll show you what we do to slice it up, get the juices back on this thing, and we're going to have some good eating this evening. Okay, so the brisket's been sitting wrapped up in the cooler for 5 hours now. We're getting ready to take everything apart, show you what we do to slice it up. Again, this is going to stay hot, so have you a good pair of gloves to put on. Now again, this was a full packer brisket, which means you had a flat and a point all together. So when you get ready to slice this thing, if you just take your knife and kind of run it right down in between there, the point just comes right apart. And so then you're left with the flat, which is where you get most of your slices out of it, and then the point, we'll kind of chop that up. Those are where your burnt ends and things like that come from. So we'll just cut a few slices off of this thing, see how it looks. Again, you can slice it whatever thickness you prefer. If you like thin, or if you want some thicker pieces. There you go, and you see it's just kind of breaking right apart there, which is what we're looking for. So you don't want it to be tough, and you can see that is just pulling right apart. So That's what we'll do for the whole flat. We'll slice that whole thing up. The point is my favorite. Again, I'm gonna cut that in bigger sections. And then this is where you're still gonna have some fat down in here, so you'll have to separate some of that fat out. Once you get it cut up, you know, you're gonna end up with some that didn't render all the way through. But that's it. Take your slices out of your flat, cut your point up into chunks. We've got our jar of juice that we're reheating. We'll put this into these corning dishes here, and then we'll pour that boiling hot juice over top of it, and you're good to go. So that's all you got. Don't forget, if you're smoking a brisket, don't forget about pit privilege, which means if you're running the pit, then you get the privilege of having the first taste of it. So we'll see what we got here. Good brisket. I think I'm gonna have to go, or I'm gonna have a fight on my hands. Everybody's gonna want to eat. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you found what you were looking for. Again, this was just a common man answering some very common questions.
He gone. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed and maybe even learned a little something. Don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel. And if you have a question about something, make sure to leave us a comment down below. We'll see if this common man can answer your very common question. She go.